the guys that Zimmer believes in. I think it's the guys that he trusts, and they brought back Sendejo because he trusts him, and that's kind of why he's on the field right now. But what do you think, Courtney, of this matchup between Mike Zimmer and Kyle Shanahan? I really liked it with Sean Payton and Mike Zimmer because you have two legends there. But Shanahan, I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I think Shanahan is number one in the NFL in terms of offensive minds, offensive creativity. And I wasn't overly impressed with what Sean Payton dialed up, but I think I'm going to be when we get out there to Santa Clara.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be said, too, just about the long lineage of football systems that he comes from. And we just got off a conference call with him, and, everybody kind of wants to categorize and put his offense into a box, the offense that, he and Sean McVay run. And he was asked about it, where, it's tough to do that because, from a verbiage standpoint, it's a West Coast offense. But what they do honestly changes from opponent to opponent. Like, I remember watching a few 49ers games this year, and the offense that we saw in the Seattle game, in the Saints game, and then I think I saw them against the Rams as well. I mean, they change to their personnel. They change to the type of defensive lines that they have to go up against. If they're able to, be like, for example, with Minnesota, like, they've got Dalvin Cook. He can bounce outside. They know that their strength in the defensive line is their interior pass rush. And being able to stop guys who try to run up the middle on them. Like, so how are they going to change to try to make sure that these outside runs don't end up becoming 30, 40-yard gains? Like, that to me is what Kyle Shanahan was talking about, just in terms of the overall system, because I feel like they do it defensively too. They kind of can change their identity. But back to your original point of him is this offensive mind. I mean, it's a melding of systems. Like what Gary is running here, Shanahan said, is kind of what it's his dad's offense. It's Mike Shanahan's offense. And you can see kind of some of the similarities, I think, from if you went back and saw Denver back when those two were working together. And I think that that's what they brought, that's what they brought here this year. That is what Kirk Cousins, that's the type of system that's bringing out the best in Kirk Cousins right now. So to me, it's interesting because you have two teams that are run first. They're more balanced than anybody else in the NFL. But they do a lot of the similar things. That they use a fullback. They, are under center a lot. They use a ton of play action. It is going to be really interesting to see how those two look kind of side by side. Because I'm wondering, seeing them in the same place, is it going to look like a mirror? You're showing a mirror each time each offense is on the field, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you bring up the running game, and it's very similar for these two teams, the type of yardage they put up, and very different in how they get there with, the system, is the zone and so forth, but with three guys for the 49ers rushing between 500 and 1,000 yards, and with the Vikings, the attention is all completely on Dalvin Cook. And Dalvin, I won't say got defensive, but sort of today about talking about getting injured against the Denver Broncos and then again against the Seattle Seahawks. He said, I was banged up, not injured. Okay, whatever that means.
Potato at this point. I think he's frustrated. And I know you and I talked about this. I'm in New Orleans, and I saw him leaving the locker room. And I yelled. I was like, hey, next time someone asks you for a percentage of how healthy you are, give a really arbitrary number. I was going to say 7. I found out his number he was going to give was 72%.
That would have been perfect. That would have been great.
I told him he has to add a decimal in there. It has to be 72.334%.
Yeah.
But I just think honestly he's tired of talking about it because we saw how good that offense is with him in it. I think it's probably even better if he's even half healthy. It shows you just the importance of that he plays in this scheme and how he's able to bring this offense to life at times where you might doubt that might be possible, which I think is why when you look at this matchup, he's so critically important to start the run game and just kind of rip off some of those big outside runs that we saw several of in the Superdome because they're typically not very good coming off the edge. I mean, they're not awful, but it kind of just depends. They don't have the same type of speed, I think, with that unit. I mean, they're very good interior defensive linemen. That's their bread and butter. And obviously it depends kind of where you're putting Nick Bosa and things like that. But that should be, since they're not giving us any shred of what they want to do, which you can respect, in a playoff week. Like that to me would be the first thing that I'm looking at as I'm thinking about how is this defense going to stop the Vikings.
So, yeah, all right, let's go on that side though. I mean, when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers defense, they are absolutely stacked on the defensive line. They've got a lot of guys who could get after the passer. Nick Bosa is great, but they lost their nose tackle to injury, and it could be a little bit easier to run against them. They've looked a lot more human of late. So, I mean, are we looking at the 49ers defense as kind of vulnerable here, or could it be that, Kyle Shanahan has such great knowledge and they have a number of players who are very good. And I saw that Quan Alexander looks like he might play
back, right?
At linebacker, and Richard Sherman is still on this team and has a week to be healthy. I wonder who you think has the advantage there.
Of which group on defense, or Vikings offense versus San Francisco 49ers defense?
I'm talking about the 49ers defense against the Vikings offense.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was asking. Well, it's hard. Honestly, it's really hard to look at Kirk Cousins and see what he did in the Superdome and say, and not look at that and be like, that is a huge threat. However, whoever you're going against, that's a huge threat, no matter how good the defense is. But I think this defensive line, the fact that we heard nothing essentially from Cam Jordan the other day, outside of a few tackles here and there, he was kind of rendered ineffective by and large throughout that game. And it's like, okay, use that game plan on Nick Bosa, use that game plan on, however you're going to block, DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, you do that. That to me is just the way that if this is typically going to be a game of defensive line play from both teams, that's what I would at least look at. But to me, it starts again with the run. You saw how effective they were early on in New Orleans with Dalvin Cook because they had so few play action attempts. I think he was 6 of 11 on play action throws. And that's because they took that away pretty seamlessly, or at least they were able to stifle it by and large. But, I think it starts with Dalvin. And yes, teams have now against a very good team in the NFC, they've got film on what worked to get, Dalvin had -2 yards in the second half. They clearly adjusted. But I think at some point that's going to wear you down no matter how good your defensive line is, because, even some of the best run defending teams this year, like Dallas at the time that, remember when they played down there and we thought, okay, they're going to try to sell out the way that the Vikings did to stop Zeke. They certainly didn't. And it wasn't like he went off. He had a tremendous game, but it's not like he had, 200 yards rushing. He did a really good job being able to still kind of keep that part of their game active, whether it's, the non-traditional way that I guess you would think of using Dalvin Cook, and maybe utilizing him a little bit more on, swing passes and trying to force things outside. That is, I think, probably where the Vikings can win this game, not just, those throws that Kirk Cousins made and just the third down play calling itself, I think was terrific. But some of that too, I think, is a breakdown on the other side of the defense that allows you to be that